Good morning, everybody. We're talking politics and post-election analysis with our guest, Alec Zimmerman, today, Thursday, November 7th, 2024. For DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, and you are watching DrydenWire Live, presented by Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin. AFP Wisconsin works to reignite the American dream and break down government barriers that hold us back from our full potential. Find an event near you at afpwisconsin.com and join AFP to fight for more freedom for all Wisconsinites. Our guest today brings nearly a decade of expertise in political communication, messaging, and strategy, having worked on high-profile campaigns that captured both local and national attention. We have a lot to unpack today, obviously, with the elections just happening. So let's get to it as we welcome in, for the first time on the show, one of the smartest political-minded people that I know, Alec Zimmerman. Alec, good morning, sir. How are you?
Hey, Ben. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I can't believe we've known each other for years now, several years now. I don't know how you've never been on before. So I apologize for that, because you totally should have been.
I've booked the show a lot for different
elected
officials and people I've worked for, but I don't think I've ever been on. It's cool to be on this side.
Yeah, so if anyone was wondering, well, why in the world was Rebecca Kleefisch on the show 4 times? Well, you're looking at the reason why, Alec Zimmerman. Because when someone asks to come on, we say yes, and you kept asking, like, okay.
Hey, you guys, DrydenWire is one of the biggest shows, I think, in Northwest Wisconsin, one of the biggest outlets up there, and so really honored to be here and excited to break things down and see if we can figure out what happened together.
Yeah. This is going to be fun. I'm so looking forward to the show. I really am, and getting your insights. But first, because this is the first time that you've been on the show, for people who don't know you, give us a quick bio.
Yeah, so I work at a firm, Platform Communications. We do public affair and advocacy, so work around legislation happening at the Capitol, local initiatives in front of town boards, things like that. Really focused here in Wisconsin. But before that, I spent years doing political campaigns, basically. I ran the communications work and messaging at the Republican Party of Wisconsin during the 18 and the 20 cycle. You kind of mentioned Rebecca Kleefisch. I worked on her gubernatorial campaign in 2022, and then I ran communications for Ron Johnson's reelect in 22 from the primary on. So,
and what do you do at Platform?
Yeah, so it's a lot of the same principles and same concepts on political campaigns, but really just for private sector clients now. So I would say that, what makes us special at Platform is we kind of take that campaign mentality and we apply it to things that folks are working on. Everybody from, I've done work with Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, Home Crew Coalition, in Milwaukee on the Brewers Stadium, that sort of thing. So we really take sort of the principles of communication that we learn around political campaigns, kind of apply those to private sector clients to get what they need to get done.
And you weren't on a campaign this last election cycle.
I took it off. I had a daughter in December of 2022, and so it was time to take an election cycle off. It was the first one since I was 21 years old, so like 10 years, a little over 10 years.
Now, during that election, during all the stuff, it's an election cycle, so of course, you read everything that everyone else reads. Are you going, oh, I'm so glad that I'm not on this one? Or is there a little bit of, man, I miss it, I kind of wish, there's a part of me that wants to be a part of something on this? Or are you really, really glad that you weren't, or that you didn't?
Man, I had a boss once describe politics and political campaigns as professional athletics for unathletic people. Like it's this like fight
Sure.
You want to win, right? And
Yeah.
so you get a lot of people out there you get some who are motivated by policy, but you also have some that are motivated just to go out and win. And so I fall probably somewhere between those two camps. And so there was a lot of times this cycle where I was like, man, I wish I was in the trenches because a lot of my friends are still doing it. And I miss a lot of those guys. But then there's also, Saturday when I'm sitting on my couch watching college football and not writing press releases or answering reporter questions. I can get used to that. I like that a lot.
So that is interesting. Right before we went live, you said something that I thought was great, and it's actually kind of helped changed, I think, how I wanted to approach the show, but I didn't know until like 2 minutes before we went live. You had said, not like a numbers guy per se. I'm a words guy, and that's true, right? You've done communication. So what is that job? What we usually do is comms. For a lot of people hear comms, but what does that actually mean? What did you usually do on campaigns?
It's so broad, and every campaign functions differently, right? Like Trump's campaign is built very different than Eric Hovde's campaign was, and then Ron Johnson's campaign was. Like, they all kind of function internally a little bit differently, but for the most part, communications departments in political campaigns are focused on getting out the candidate's message to media through earned media, social media, and digital platforms, and occasionally we dabble in like paid spaces where you'll have communications department writing ads, radio, TV, digital, you name it. Sometimes that's kind of a shared duty that falls across all departments, but that's a really boring answer for I talk to press all day is more or less what I do. So
when you do talk to press, you must have to, like any good communications person as you are, you have to know your audience, right?
Yeah.
So what's the difference when you talk to Wisconsin right now versus the Journal Sentinel? Is it the same exact thing, actually? Or, I mean, is there any difference when you talk to different outlets?
I'm not an actor, right? So I want to be authentic when I'm talking to any media at any time, and I want to make sure that I'm the same person to each outlet across, because they all read each other's work. And so right. I would say there's not like a huge difference, but there's issues that I know just from working with these guys for years that this reporter is most interested in this issue, and so I should take this thing to them. This reporter's interested, and so when you get that breakdown between like mainstream media and right-wing media, maybe that's where the specialty kind of plays in, right? Where like there's certain things that I'll take to a mainstream reporter because I know that reporter is interested in it. There's other things that I know that mainstream reporter might not do, but I know that like the Roe Wisconsin right now, it's the Dan O'Donnells of the world, like these sort of like legacy guys in right-wing media in Wisconsin, which we have a lot of, that they'll be more interested in it, and that they'll maybe do a different job or a better job even sometimes than a mainstream reporter would.
No, isn't that it? I find that fascinating that you use those words, because as you've just established, or we've just established, you're a words guy. You didn't say right-wing and left-wing media. You said right-wing and mainstream media. I'm assuming that's on purpose.
Well, there is, I'll say this, like, without like ragging on mainstream media too much, because there are a lot of good reporters out there. There are some that are, I think, a little bit more political operatives than they are reporters, and they gray the line a little bit. There is left-wing media in Wisconsin. You know, Civic Media has radio stations around the state now. There's a couple like left-wing online outlets. They're not as, I mean, just coming from the Republican side, I'm not as tapped in there as I am with the right-wing ones or the mainstream ones, just from political campaign work. And I would argue that they're probably not as established as some of like the right-wing media in Wisconsin, because talk radio, I mean, especially in southeast Wisconsin,
that's
talk
huge
radio
down there. Gigantic down there. Like, we don't have any of that up here. I think the only one, or one of the few that I know of in just northern Wisconsin, is over in Wausau. That's
Meg.
What's her name? Meg Ellefson, right?
Yeah, she's fantastic. And then you got Joe Gigante over in Green Bay. He's great too. Like it's really interesting. It's been one of the fun things to watch. Like as I've done more political campaign work, is kind of how talk radio's influence has spread. Right, like when I started, it was really southeast Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. Now we're kind of seeing it grow a little bit outstate. Like Meg's got a fantastic show in Wausau. Mm-hmm. She's very conservative, but she's like very articulate in her views and loves having guests on. So great show there. Joe Gigante, same thing. Green Bay, he's really grown. His show's like national now, I think. So
what?
Yeah, it's syndicated, I believe. So it's a really fun time in the right-wing media landscape in the state, but it's something that the state's always really had, and it's been unique here.
Sure.
To political news.
So let's talk about messaging. And I want to talk about kind of the post-election analysis specifically, or vis-a-vis Wisconsin. But I don't know if we can really talk about Wisconsin post-election analysis without first talking about the presidential election, because that obviously had a down ticket effect, a trickle-down effect there. So going into it, if I had called you on Election Day 2 days ago and said, so who do you have, not who do you want to win, but who do you think is going to win, what would you have told me 2 days ago in terms of the presidential race?
I think we had that conversation even maybe. I thought Trump was in a good place to win. But I think also all the polling that you saw in the lead up really had the race as a jump ball, right? Yeah. The thing I'd been kind of telling people leading into it was anytime it's a tie race, you got to look at the trend line and see who's going up and who's going down. And he had really gained momentum in the last couple of months, I think. And same thing for Eric Hovde. We'd really seen the race move more towards Republicans in that last couple months. Mm-hmm. Early vote numbers were incredibly strong in Republican areas for like the 2 weeks leading into it. And I had heard a lot of chatter from friends on the political side and in the campaigns that they felt really good about the numbers that they were seeing coming in. And so I would have been the day of election or the day before election, I would have put myself in that cautiously Trump camp. I thought he was going to win narrowly. So
I had, I think on our Tuesday show with Sheriff Fitzgerald, we do a Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy show on Tuesdays, and we did our election prediction, should it go wrong. I don't even think I ended up answering that question. I think I just said it's a toss-up. I have no idea. But I did put on our Facebook page in a comment that it was right before the election, or election night, it was like at 6 o'clock on Tuesday night. I think I said, everything tells me Harris, but my gut's telling me Trump. And I don't know why. I honestly kind of predicted at the very end that I think it would be, if Trump wins, it's going to be Kamala Harris will win the popular vote.
Yeah.
But then Trump would win the Electoral College. So that was kind of my last one. But yeah, I did not see the popular vote. Did you? So in that event, did you see that happening?
That was the most surprising thing to me. I there had been good poll, like national general electorate polls for Trump. Some that had him tied, some that had him up slightly. But I think on the Republican side of things, I think we're so used to Democrats making the argument against the Electoral College and saying that it should go away that I think sometimes, we forget winning the popular vote's even an option, right? Like it's something that we're capable of. And I think that's something that's incredibly unique to Trump. That's something that I'm trying to think of who the last Republican candidate to win the popular vote is.
It wouldn't be, not 2020, of course. 2016. No. 20 before that was 2012. That would have been Obama, and then Obama, and then George W. Bush. That'd be 2004 reelection. Yeah. 2004. That would be against what's his name? He was on Obama's. Who's his opponent? Older guy. He was on. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep. So that would have been the last one, because the one before that would have been 2000, and that was Al Gore, and that was a popular vote for him. So then, if you go back even further, then it would be Bill Clinton. It would have been George W. Bush back in 1988. So 1988 and 2004 are the last two Republican presidential elections that they won the popular vote and the Electoral College.
It's like once in 30 years.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah.
It's just something that but props to the future president and former president's campaign. Like he had a message that resonated with working class folks around the country. And he didn't just win the states he needed to win. He drove up margins.
No kidding.
In New York, that he was doubling his support in New York City, and that's how you win the popular vote, right?
And that last election prediction in Iowa that was a very well known. I can't remember her name right now, but the very very well known pollster had put Kamala Harris up by 3, and that was the last one, and he won by 13. Holy cow, how far off are we? Let me ask you this. So I saw this morning. I took a screenshot of it so I didn't lose it. This was first let me ask you, what do you think going into this election, whether it's the presidential or Wisconsin elections, like state elections with Hovde, et cetera, whatever, what were the three biggest issues, do you think, of the people that were polled saying, what are your three, tell me what's your top issue, and then what were the top three answers? What do you think they were going to be?
I would have guessed economy, immigration, abortion.
You're right. That's exactly right. According to I can't remember, I took a screenshot of this, but so I can't see who the website was. I can't remember now. But it said about 4 in 10 voters, this was exit polling, 4 in 10 voters consider the economy to be the most important problem facing the country, as frustration with inflation spiking in 2022 lingered into the form of higher grocery, housing, and gasoline costs. So I think we all kind of figured that one, economy. Now, Let's stop there and say, that should probably have benefited the Republicans, right? If that was going to be the number one, that would have benefited Republicans. And if so, why?
Well, I think you got to look at inflation, right? Like first and foremost being like the number one issue on people's mind. Yeah. And I think that throughout the last 2 years, that sort of got laid at Joe Biden's feet. And it was Joe Biden's fault that inflation was that bad. And a lot of the messaging and a lot of the news cycles weren't good for him. And so I think that this sentiment built up amongst voters and resentment towards Democrats that they owned part of this inflation problem. And, the polling that's done on folks' sentiments that are on the economy, right track, wrong track, strong, not strong, there's different ways to ask a question, a million different ways. Yeah. But it always was bad, right? And that typically does not benefit the party that's in power.
Sure.
So then the Democrats get rid of Joe Biden and they put Kamala Harris in there. And I think she had like a nice little honeymoon.
Oh my goodness, that first month. Like I'll tell you right now, on our Beneficia show like 3 months ago, 2 months, whatever it was, I said right there, I'm like, race is over. Kamala Harris won. Done. Yeah. Like seriously, like it's over. But then every week after that, I'm like, well, hold on. hold on.
They just couldn't get they couldn't make that last, one. And then two, they just could not separate her down the stretch from Joe Biden. I mean, you saw that answer she gave on The View where and she deserves a lot of the blame for that. That answer she gave on The View.
That's a terrible answer. Even if it's true, that's a terrible answer. Like you should know how to answer that question. I'm sorry, for people who don't know, what did she say?
She said they asked her what's one thing you would do differently than Joe Biden. So mind you, Joe Biden is gone because Joe Biden was so unpopular they didn't think he could beat Trump. What's one thing different that you would do from Joe Biden? And she says, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but she says, I can't think of anything I would have done differently. And it your whole campaign is built around the fact that you replaced him and you can't think of one thing you'd do differently. And so I just think that right there was when, I don't want to say the wheels fell off, but that was like the beginning of the end for them, because that was in every ad. And then all these problems that drug Joe Biden's numbers down on the economy, on immigration, before when he was still in the race, that led to her getting in the race, she now owns those things. Mm-hmm. And it's in all of the messaging that you see. I mean, I couldn't turn on the TV for like 2 weeks after that View comment without seeing it on paid media. So it really, really big misstep from their campaign that I think they would probably say they want back.
Well, neither of us are economists, but looking at this a little bit differently, it's kind of like a head coach. I've used this reference before, that a head coach of a football team, you could go like 6-0 and you get all the credit. Right? Wow, you're a brilliant head coach, and then you lose 3 games in a row, and you haven't done anything different, right? You just lost 3 games, and it's now you are the worst coach, and they should fire you. My point behind that is sometimes the head coaches, in this case presidents, they get credit for things that they deserve, and sometimes they don't deserve the credit for that, but they get it anyway. But that also means sometimes when things go bad, you get the blame for it, when sometimes that actually isn't your fault. Neither of us are economists, so I don't know. I really don't. Maybe you do. Of why, is it fair to say that our economy is that bad because of Joe Biden / Democrats? I don't know the answer to that. at all. But from a word standpoint, from a messaging standpoint, what would you have advised? How do you change that narrative?
Well, I mean, it's about how people feel, right? Like, and I don't, want to Monday morning quarterback them, but I don't think they ever made people feel like like they actually cared about the problem. It was, they didn't do enough to address it, so there wasn't immediate relief. We'll start there. Like, grocery prices are still high. I still go to the store when I grocery shop for my family on Thursday nights. I go to the store and I'm shocked, right? So that's that. That's what people are seeing in the store. But then their messaging around it was like, it seemed like at the beginning they just sort of denied the existence of inflation and acted like it wasn't a real problem that people were dealing with, even though all the polling, all of the data on the economy shows otherwise. And then when you ask her for, Kamala or Biden for that matter, what their plan is to deal with it, I just don't think they ever had like a cohesive message around how they plan to address this when they were campaigning. I mean, she was out there talking about, we're going to hold corporations accountable for price gouging. And I just think that that's too separated from the issue. I don't think people really saw that as the root problem. I think there were all these other problems from the Biden and Harris administration that they looked at and were like, well, that's why this is happening. We have to go do something about that. They never were able to connect the dots there. And that's kind of what campaign messaging is all about.
The second thing of again, these are exit polls. So about 4 in 10 voters considered the economy to be the most important issue. And then the second one is immigration. That's 2 of 10 voters said the top issue is immigration. And you were right, by the way, abortion was about 1 in 10. I had economy 1 going into it, abortion 2, then immigration. I was a little surprised, apparently you weren't, that immigration was the second top issue for voters. Is that also, do you think that's a little bit tied into what you just got finished talking about when it came to the economy, where it didn't really seem to have a plan with immigration? I mean, it's been, quite a while that we've had the issue with immigration, and it didn't really seem to have, like, what's the plan?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that both parties, I mean, it's been a problem for, like you said, a long time now. I think if you look like just at the data of border crossings and the migration numbers from Trump's administration to Biden's administration, it told a pretty clear story that I think people were feeling on the ground. I mean, you read headlines from New York City and the problems that they're having with migrant housing crisis, Chicago, like it again, it's all about how people feel. That's why people vote the way that they do. And like, people are feeling these different pressures. And so suddenly immigration isn't just a border issue, it's an everywhere issue. Yeah. There's some stories in Whitewater, Wisconsin, where a large number of migrant families have moved to, and the problems that is, infrastructure problems that has created there.
Sure.
It sort of becomes like an everybody issue, and it makes it so it's not just on the border. And again, they just didn't have an answer for what they're going to do, but they also undid a bunch of Trump stuff that was very clearly working from that data that I just referenced, right? And so then you have the fact that early on in the administration, when they were looking for something for Kamala Harris to do, they named her the border czar.
Yeah, ouch.
And I mean, that clearly didn't work. And then there was like about a 2-week period where the media tried to tell us that she wasn't actually named the border czar, even though there's all the receipts from when they reported on her being named it. And it was just a incredibly messy answer for them that they were not able to address throughout the entire campaign cycle. And I just don't think anything that they said on that issue, voters were buying. They just did not believe anything Democrats said on them.
And the last one being abortion. Now, obviously, that topic itself is a very personal issue on either side, right? It's very, very personal. But we're just talking about it from a political issue. It was the third of the top 3, number 1 issues on people's minds when voting. I actually thought that was going to be the second highest. And this morning I was thinking about it, and I was just trying to figure out like why, because Democrats really pushed that hard, which they absolutely did, which is perfectly fine. but it didn't seem to, according to the exit polling, to resonate as much. The only thing I could come up with is what Dobbs was overturned. That would have been summer of 2022. So we've already had an election cycle after Dobbs got overturned. And that's the only thing I can place why that wasn't a higher issue for people. Why do you think it wasn't higher?
Yeah, I think, voters, a lot of times when you do these polls where you ask people how they care about issues, I think it's interesting to see what they say, but it's difficult to get the intensity behind it, right? Like, how much does a voter care about a certain issue versus another issue? And so I think that on the abortion front, you're right. Like, it's been around for a while, and so it might be an issue that they care about. But it's hard to always be 10 of 10 on how much you care about an issue all the time.
Sure.
And there's been election cycles that have happened since then. The other thing is like Republicans actually moved to insulate themselves on this issue.
How so?
More this cycle than last cycle. Like, you have Trump out there saying, I'm not going to pass a national abortion ban. I'm going to leave it in the states, right? And basically saying he's not going to touch it. Ron Johnson sort of, I think, masterfully did this in 2022 when he said, I'm pro-life, but I understand how differing views people have on this. I think the state should decide through a referendum, basically. And so what you get is, like, it makes it, I think, more difficult for voters to tie them back to that specific issue, if that makes sense.
Yep.
It seemed to, like, take the edge off the bite on the attacks a little bit. I'll say this, like, what I was hearing from other reporters who were talking to Democratic campaigns and around the country in the lead up to that election was that the abortion issue wasn't moving people as fast at the end of the election as what it was, a year and a half ago, which I think is why you saw all of them shift their messaging towards democracy and sort of this, protect, save democracy line that they used. And it was something I think they put a lot of eggs in that basket, but I just don't think it ended up having the effect with voters that they thought it was going to have.
Last one on the national aspect before we get into Wisconsin. The Republicans are going to hold the Senate, which I think everyone anticipated that. And as of right now, the House is still undecided. It could be days or weeks. But it seems there's a slight advantage for Republicans right now. We're still California will be the key because they're notoriously slow for getting all these things in. Personally, do you want to have? Well, maybe that's weird. I don't know how to ask this question. We'll have a Republican president, Republican Senate. Do you also want to see a Republican House? You're a Republican, so I'm assuming yes.
Sure, yeah.
Do you like? So you like that? You don't prefer to have a split somewhere to not allow too many things to get passed, or kind of just come up with something. Fine, we'll all sign it. Done. Next.
Yeah, I think. What do I? Okay, so let's start at what I want and then what the voters want.
Okay.
So okay. I think, like, my whole life up to this point, I don't do elections anymore, but up to this point, it's been electing Republicans. So I always love to elect Republicans. That's what I've always done. I think voters do like to see checks and balances on government, and I think it's especially in Wisconsin, right? Like, I think we've had 2 elections in a row where we've had 2 different parties win at the top of the ticket, right? Evers and Ron won in 22. Trump and Baldwin Baldwin squeaked it out here this election cycle. So Wisconsin voters love that type of stuff, like split ticket, divided government, checks and balances. I think that it is going to be total Republican control. I talked to some guys at the NRSC yesterday, and they felt good about the House. I think that if I had to guess, it's Republicans probably have the House, the Senate, and obviously the presidency next time. And I think, though, that that House caucus, that House Republican caucus, has been difficult the last 4 years for whoever's leading them, to say the least. I think they'll have a narrow majority if they come back, and so that, I think, could create some headaches. I don't think it's going to be like Republicans walk in there and can do whatever they want. Like that's a pretty diverse caucus when it comes to their viewpoints on the right side of the political spectrum. So I could see the House getting a little bit gummed up trying to pass some things here and there.
Yeah, and you're right. They kind of have been for the last few years.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, they can't even figure out who their speaker is, it seems like, at any given point. And you just don't like him, well, let's get rid of this person. But no, you're right. So is that, from a Republican standpoint, let's shift to Wisconsin, but maybe in a little more macro level, just Republican Party in general, because that's where you seem to have a more experience and knowledge in. Is the Republican Party, a lot of people thought that it was kind of broken because there's so much shift between patriot groups and there were strong people on, it seems like there's different categories of Republicans. The conservative, the old school, the Reagan Republicans, the this Republican, the that Republican, as you just got finished saying. In the House, there's kind of a split there. Where does the Republican Party go from here? Is the Republican Party okay right now? Is the Trump win okay? And if he didn't win, I mean, what in the world? I was literally thinking, I even told my wife like the night of the election, and she thought I was crazy, which I am. I said, if Trump doesn't win this, seriously, like from a Republican standpoint, I don't know what they're going to do. Like, this could be the end of the Republican Party. Like, that was just how extreme I was thinking at the time. And of course, now that he won, people are saying about the Democratic Party, you'll never win again. And like, okay, like I'm a huge overreaction guy. But how is the Republican Party doing right now? Is this good for the party? Not talking the next 2 or 4 years. Is this good for the party, the Republican Party?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at politics right now, you have to talk about the realignment that's happening. It started in 2016 and continues to happen today, right? Where you see these, the Republican Party used to be, I think, significantly more elite in who they talk to, who their core constituency and voters are, and those folks showing up reliably for them year over year in elections. Now I think the party is more blue collar. It's more of a working class party. I think you see that through Trump making a lot of inroads with unions this year and the way he tried to go towards union members and try and get them on board. But just beyond that, I think you look at the way the coalition he built. He did like historic numbers this year within working class minority communities, both Hispanic and African American. And I think that there is a massive shift happening within our politics, and you're seeing the Republican Party sort of talk to regular, everyday Americans better than they ever have. And a lot of that has to do with Donald Trump. And I think a lot of that is because of Donald Trump. And you have a lot of folks who are from areas where I grew up that feel left behind by, rural folks who feel left behind by the Democratic Party. And they really feel that Donald Trump speaks to them. And so you've seen these like rural blue counties that had voted blue for years in Wisconsin swing in 2016 to the Republicans. They're still there. I think from the Republican Party's standpoint, our responsibility is how to figure out in off years how to hold that coalition together.
That's where I was actually going to be going with this, is segueing into Wisconsin. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's exactly where I want to go with this. Is typically in not an off cycle. What's it called?
Midterm.
Midterm. Thank you. In a midterm election, it typically goes in the state races and local races and et cetera. Actually, probably even the House and whatever. It tends to lean a little bit more towards the opposite party that is in the presidency. So that means in 2 years in Wisconsin, it should be more of a Democratic. I'm not going to say wave. But it tends to go that way. But we have a Wisconsin governor race in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and you could probably tell us more specifically, but I'm pretty sure that the Republicans still hold the Senate and the assembly in Wisconsin, but those numbers have gone down, which could set them up for a big win. This could have some very big impacts in 2 years for Republicans or Democrats, however you want to look at it. How do you think that's going to go?
Well, I think general rule of thumb amongst political consultants is that the party that's not in power always has a better year in the midterm.
Right.
And so I think that's something that if you're a Republican, you got to be concerned with, right? And you have to start working now, not like next week, now, today, to build the infrastructure that allows you to succeed in a midterm environment that might not be the most friendly to you. And so here the stakes are definitely higher than they were in the 2018 midterm. In the 2018 midterm, So first off, in 2018, it was the worst cycle for Republicans since Watergate. It was awful.
It was horrible. Yeah.
Scott Walker, defied gravity by only losing by 1 point, and that's because he built an operation here that was a machine that was identifying and turning out voters and engaging people. I mean, we had a year-round field program. We had like 5 offices open. It was like we knew going into that election that it was going to be tough for him to get a third term because voters don't like third terms for governors to begin with, and because it was a midterm. And so you had to start building then to even give yourself a chance of success. So I think if you're a Republican, ask yourself, what are we doing to get organized like now? Because these races in the assembly are closer after redistricting. It's, Democrats have a path there. And in the Senate, if they have a really, really good cycle. I think, though, that at the same time, one thing that we should all, be thankful for is Rob and Voss and the Republicans in the Assembly have built a machine that knows how to win. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. Like, they came back with 54 this time. He's got guys like Todd Novak who are in these lean blue districts that have incredible community ties, and they go in there and election after election after election, Democrats target them and say, this is the election, we knock them off, and they don't do it. And it's because of the machine that Robin and the Assembly Republicans have built. And so, it's always a little bit of a worry when you're the party in power, what's going to happen in the midterm. But I also think that we have the ability to step up our game and defend that turf.
So the fair maps, my understanding now is that is, what's that?
I said fair maps. We'll put it in.
Yeah, we'll put it air quotes. Sure. I know in our area, northwest Wisconsin, I mean, the 73rd is now, well, it's not even our coverage area anymore, so we don't even follow it anymore, but it's just a sliver up like Superior and Ashland. So that's very, very blue. And our assembly races in the 67th, Rob Summerfield, 68th, Dave Armstrong, the 74th would be Chance Green, the 75th, now Duke Tucker. And then you throw in 7th Congressional District with Tom Tiffany. That's in our coverage area. I mean, none of these were close. All the Republicans won by at least 61%. I mean, that is a massive blowout. Anything over 60%, what? And some of it, certainly they had higher percentages because people really like that individual. But these are, let's just face it, they're Republican seats right now, almost like by default. So we don't really see a whole lot in our area. But now that we know that these are actually the Assembly and the Senate has been reduced, is that really what the goal kind of was? It isn't even about the specific. We're just going to give up. We know we're going to never win these races. Who cares? Because there seems to be a lot more of the races in our area where it's definitely Democrat or it's definitely Republican, but it has narrowed the field in some of the others. What is your view on that?
I think that Democrats' complaints over the last round of maps, I mean, between, there was, I'm trying to think how many court cases there was. Countless. I think a lot of their complaints came down to the fact that they thought, well, we'll never win in these maps. And so when they take power, they push these other maps that are now in the ones that are in place, that give Democrats, more of a pathway to winning than what the old maps did. But they did things like drawing assembly representatives out of their old districts by a block. A lot of the things that they claim Republicans did, they ended up doing.
They did that to Romaine Quinn, Senator of the 25th, and they moved that around. I'm like, come on. Like a mile. There's countless stories, and it's like, these fair maps just happened to cut Republicans out of their district by, a street. That's okay. So I think when Democrats woke up, though, on Wednesday morning of this week, if I were them, the lesson I would take away is we don't have a geography problem. We have a candidate message problem, because in theory, they should have contested for the state assembly, and they didn't. And it wasn't even close in a lot of these places where Republicans won races that were in Democrat-leaning districts.
And that has always been my argument, is that time and time again, when you get these Democrats running in these rural state house seats that they should be competitive for, they're not running candidates with deep community ties.
Right.
They're not running authentic candidates with stories that like resonate with voters there. They're running Democratic political operatives who just don't stand a chance. And I think that's something that Robin and Devin LeMahieu, and the Senate Majority Leader, and before him Scott Fitzgerald, the Senate Majority Leader, they do a fantastic job going to these communities and finding candidates that are extremely well respected in the community and actually like for lack of a better term, fit the community. Like they're authentic to the folks there. People know them, and it just seems to me like that's why we have always had the success we've had in Wisconsin at the legislative level, and not some maps, you know?
I'm just in my mind's eye, I'm picturing, and I'm sorry, my mom actually has a question here. She must be watching. So I'll put that out here in a second. I'm just picturing in my mind's eye, applying what you just said to the races in our area. And it fits every single one, to be honest.
Yeah. Like, I mean,
that's bizarre.
I can't remember what district it was, but it was like a rural Wisconsin district, and the Republicans were running like a dairy farmer, and the Democrats were running like an organic hobby farmer, right? And I was like, what a perfect – it wasn't this year. This was years ago. I was like, This is a perfect like encapsulation of they do just enough but not at all. I can't remember which district it was. This was like a decade ago.
So. Oh, sure.
Somebody who's smarter than me probably remembers.
Yeah, my mom has a question. Is someone looking to run against Evers yet? Have you heard? Oh, this is great. And come on, you got to tell us if you've heard anything. Because I've heard of one.
Names. I've heard a lot of names mentioned out there. And these are not.
Well, this is not like inside story stuff, like
Yeah.
But I'm sure this name's been floated out. I've obviously a lot of people think that Tom Tiffany may, because he dabbled his feet in the Senate race, right? Just for a minute to think about maybe running in the Wisconsin Senate. Does he stay in the House and just move up, maybe more towards GOP leadership? I mean, the 7th Congressional District is a pretty red district. He's got that job pretty much as long as he wants it, to be honest, unless you do something really stupid to screw it up. So why risk it? But that is in 2 years, and just saying, I've heard that name thrown out. I'm sure he's going to look into it. I'm not saying he's going to actually do it, but of course he'll be considered. And I do believe if there is a short list, he probably is on it. If there is like a top 5, top 10, whatever, I'm sure that his name is on it. Have you heard of anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, so Tom would be such a strong candidate if he ran. I mean, one, he's got great ties up there. You know it. He's on your show all the time. But really, northern Wisconsin has kind of become a hotbed for Republican votes in a primary. I mean, that's, if you look at like Becky Kleefisch versus Tim Michaels primary map and where we lost that race, it was a lot of rural votes that came in heavy for Tim Michaels while we kind of won the suburbs and the urban areas. And so the primary calculus in Wisconsin used to be you draw a wall around like Waukesha County, with the WOW counties in Milwaukee, basically, and you run up the score there, and then you kind of don't worry about the rest of the state because it never adds up. Now it's flipped on its head. Like those numbers outstate are really important for Republican primary candidates. So if Tom ran, he would be an incredibly strong place. Not to mention the fact that he's a good candidate because he knows how to get things done in Madison because he's been there before, and really well respected up there. Just from what I know from being up there a lot. So other names, I mean, I don't know that anybody's expressed interest that I've seen overtly. I think
not necessarily even expressed interest, but just names that you've heard that could be a candidate. Like, well, this person probably could run a good campaign.
I think sticking with congressional seats, I think Brian Stiles, a guy in the 1st who's kind of an up-and-comer in the GOP. He'd be fantastic. Scott Fitzgerald over in the 5th. He's done a lot of work in Madison as a former Senate Majority Leader before coming over and being in Congress in the out of the, where is he? That district's kind of like the northwest suburbs of Milwaukee now. I think those three at the congressional level. I think in Washington County, you got a county executive there, Josh Showman, who's another guy who's like really in this thought leader space and doing a lot of cool things at the county level, whether it's housing policy or otherwise, that kind of make him an intriguing candidate. I've heard some names of folks who are like more on the business side mentioned that I don't know anything about really, but guys like Bill Berrien, Matt Newman, I know Matt a little bit, whose names I've heard trickle out there. So I think there's going to be no shortage of candidates for this.
Do you think Rebecca Kleefisch is interested again, or are we going to also, because you always have to think of the X factors there, the Tim Michaels, where it's like, where did that come from, kind of a thing, right? Like what?
I think Rebecca would be fantastic. I think she ran an incredible operation. I'm biased because I was part of it. I think if Rebecca wanted to run for governor, I think she would be a fantastic candidate again. And most importantly, she would make a great governor. Like, that's what I believed when I started working for her campaign, and I still believe it today. She cares so deeply about the state that I think that she would be fantastic as its leader. Michaels, I haven't really seen him around much.
Really? Isn't that interesting?
He was
Did anyone actually think you were going to ever see that person ever again? No.
He was at the RNC. He was a delegate there, so I will say that he did go to that. But beyond that, I haven't seen him at too many GOP events since then. So but there's certainly potential, and he'd make a strong candidate. He had President Trump's ear last time. He put a lot of money into the race, so there's a lot of fundamentals where if he wanted to run again, he could probably swoop in and be a formidable candidate, I think. Yeah.
So the Republicans in Wisconsin right now, you're saying that from your knowledge and your history and your expertise on strategy and on words and on communication, their messaging worked, right? That's what I'm hearing from you.
For sure.
Their message was better than the Democrats. It resonated more with people than the Democrats. And that really is the overarching message here. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think different. I mean, we didn't win everywhere, but we won the big one, which was president. I think if you look at what the president messaged and what he was saying on that campaign, he had a powerful way of reaching not just Republican voters, but low propensity voters who don't often show up, and getting them to come out to the polls to vote for him, especially folks from rural areas that I mean, some of his rural margins were massive. I was watching Eric Bott, AFP, his Twitter account. He was awesome on Twitter on Tuesday night to follow, because he was breaking down all the numbers in real time. And, he was running up numbers in these rural areas that, frankly, I don't think folks have really seen before. And so his message really hit with those people, and there's a lot to learn there, I think.
Well, there is, even looking at our area. And I think we need to keep this in mind. In 2 years from now, when we look at the districts and how they've voted in the past, like, well, this district actually got 68% Republican, and this well, hold on, like, this was a huge turnout and huge win for Republicans in a lot of these districts. It started with Trump, of course, and it filtered down, but even some of the let's say it's the Washburn County, let's say they usually go like 60% Republican. No, that would have been like 75% this time, or over 70%. Like, I'm just saying, they were all inflated. So just a little warning there to you Republicans, be careful next year. Don't be too safe, because this was huge. I looked at all of our area counties and what the turnout was for Republicans, or at the very least, like who they voted for president, and then some of your, like the Tom Tiffany, those are kind of my two barometers there. And it was massive. Like, holding like 7,000 to 4,000. I know for you that's like no numbers, but that's rural, right? But like 7,000 people voted for Trump versus like 3,800 voted for him. Like, that is huge.
That's the secret sauce moving forward, right? How do you get those voters that turned out for Trump that may not have turned out in past midterms? How do you bring them into the fold for those elections?
Is there any good news for Democrats? Is there any, like, so seriously, like, if you were actually, all right, so here's why you shouldn't be overly concerned. Yeah, you took a whooping this last time around, but here would I don't know if you want to give free advice to the Democrats, but, should they be overly concerned? I mean, I hear a whole bunch of celebrities wanting to move to UK right now, but who cares, by the way? Who cares about what freaking celebrities, who they endorse, Republican or Democrat? What do I care about what you want? That's so stupid.
I think they're having a bit of an identity crisis over there right now about what the path forward is for the party, because
Yeah.
they've lost the ability to talk about, I'll say, like normal everyday voters.
Yeah.
They've lost the ability to talk to them. They aren't doing a good job there. If there's a silver lining in the numbers for them in Wisconsin
Mhm.
from Tuesday night, there were 3 um, toss up state Senate seats. I would argue that all 3 of them, it depends on who you talk to, but all 3 of them leaned down, I think. The Republicans had a chance. They needed to win all 3 to have a shot at flipping the state Senate in 2 years, and they did that. And so, they'll get their chance in 2 years to flip the legislature.
I think so
and,
too.
Either reelect Evers or whoever they put in there after Evers. But they, they have a lot of soul searching they have to do in the coming days to figure out what the message is, because there's a lot of places it's not working right now across the country, and they've just completely lost the ability, like I said, to talk to like rural everyday Americans.
Yeah, and by the way, Republicans, before you go, like all these victory things on social media and how we're amazing. I'm not talking about the actual politicians. I mean, just everyday people, and saying, "Oh, we're great and everybody sucks." Just be careful, because everyone's going to screenshot that, because in 2 years from now, it could be the exact opposite. So
majorities are never permanent, and there's always another election.
Yeah.
So get to work.
We're already past our time, but I do still want to ask you about 2 things. Baldwin won narrowly. Why? Why did she win? Or maybe I should say, why didn't Hovde win? He wasn't supposed to win at all. That was like an unwinnable seat 9 months ago. Like, who in the world would possibly want to do that? But as you were talking earlier about how you look at how it's getting closer and closer, and man, that dude picked up steam like 2.5, 3 months ago, but big time. And it was a toss-up, and it was a very close. I think there may be a recount. I'm not sure, but let's just assume that Baldwin is going to win that. Why did Hovde lose that?
I mean, she was the incumbent, right? So she has that advantage. She has a name ID. She's been around for a long time. So she's got that baked in. Eric Hovde always had an uphill fight to fight there, I think. He ran a great campaign. I mean, there's just no way around it. Like, she has, if you look at her past elections for U.S. Senate, she typically rolls. I talked to members of the press at the outset of this race, and they were all like, this isn't going to be close at the end. Right. She's going to do what she did every other time. And, Hovde came in, shook things up, ran a really solid campaign, and just sort of, I think, hammered her on TV for the last 2 months. And that's why it, I think, got as close as what it did. He also had a great message. Like, he's a businessman who wants to come in and get stuff done. I can't say enough about how well that.
And we saw him up here in rural northwest Wisconsin multiple times. I don't know if Senator Baldwin was up here. I'm sure she was. I didn't see anything about it. But boy, I mean, Hovde was everywhere. That dude put in the work. So it'll be interesting to see what she's going to do. What are those 6-year elections? Well, that's a long time from now. Lastly, real quick, I do want to shift gears real quick. I think is it this spring or is it next? I think it's this spring. Not Attorney General, Brad Schimmel, former Attorney General, Supreme Court. Isn't that coming up soon?
Yeah, April. So you're gonna enjoy the quiet, no political ads on television for a week. Brief moment. Yeah. It's coming back. Yeah.
Does Brad Schimmel have a chance in winning that against Bradley?
Brad is really.
Oh
good.
wait, no, Wait, hold on a second.
No, she's back. It's who are they running?
Yeah, she decided not to run again. It's somebody else. Oh, I can't think of the person's name right now. Does he have a realistic chance at this?
I think it's going to be tough. Just the environment is, Trump's president, party in power. I think it'll be hard, but there's nobody better for Republicans to run for that Supreme Court seat than Brad Schimmel. Like, he's going to work harder. He's going to build an actual operation. He's going to talk with a message that resonates with voters because he's done it before and he's been elected Attorney General. And
I love Brad Schimmel.
I think that have you ever had him on? He's awesome.
Several times. And back even when he was Attorney General, and we actually kept in touch for the 5 years that he was gone, just on a personal level, because I respected him so much. And my dad, former Washington County Sheriff for 28 years, Terry Dryden, he knew him well. So I wouldn't say he's like a friend of the family. Like, we don't have him over for dinner or something. But no, I have so much respect for him. You had just said that, for Republicans, that would be really good. But remember, Supreme Court and judges aren't partisan. And we're like one of only 11 states that our Supreme Court, our appellate court, and our circuit court judges are not partisan. Do you think they should be?
Well,
let's just own it, right? Done.
Protege, which had like how many millions of dollars given to her campaign from the Democratic Party of
I
Wisconsin?
mean, come on,
so,
right?
We
all know it already.
They're nonpartisan elections, but I think what you've seen is Democrats embrace the partisan nature of these Supreme Court elections more than Republicans have, and so I'm hopeful that Republicans will start fighting fire with fire here a little bit, and I think Brad's got to do it.
Awesome. Alec, thanks so much. We blew past our time. We're almost up to an hour. Sorry about that. Any final words?
No, I don't think so. Thanks for having me on. It's fun to be on this side of it for once. So
I love it. You're welcome on. We should have you on more. Well, you know what? We should probably have you on when it comes to election topics and messaging. You are now our official, I don't know, we'll come up with a title for you. And we'll have you on anytime we talk about election stuff. Special thank you to our guest today, Alec Zimmerman, for coming on and giving us post-election analysis and sharing his insights and thoughts. Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald and I are off on next Tuesday, so we won't be on for our weekly Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy show. So I'll see you in 1 week from today when Congressman Tom Tiffany will be back for his monthly chat. So until then, for DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden saying thank you for watching, and as always, have a blessed day.